can we make an industry 100% sustainable?
Well, partly I feel like because you're an engineer, that's a rhetorical question, because you'll have a strong opinion on that. But I mean, not to sound too academic about it, but for me that comes down to a question of what do you mean by sustainable? So
yes,
in a way I'd say if we can't, I mean, we all know that if we can't make our industry essentially sustainable, it's over for us as a species. So it's not really a question of can we, it's can we afford not to? But then the next question for me then would come down to, from an industrial point of view, is what do we understand industry to be?
yes,
Like, I think what's happened is we've had 100 years of or more, by accident. It's not like it was deliberate, but we've had really since the Industrial Revolution, so let's say 200 to 250 years, of a very harmful form of industrial capitalism. You know, we had a revolution in physics in the 17th and 18th centuries. That physics recognized the fact that closed systems exist, that there are no externalities. But the problem is that we've had a form of industrial capitalism that still almost runs on a medieval concept of economics, which is the idea of endless growth. And endless growth is magical thinking, really. The reality is, what we're not wanting to come to terms with is we are hitting now, I think we're hitting the fundamental limits of what the planet can give us, and we're having to curtail our behavior. And so when you say, can we have sustainable industry, my answer would be yes, but it depends what we want out of industry. If we want an iPhone every year, like if we want to just be able to buy a new, and if you look at the quantities of electronic goods that have been thrown away in the last 3 or 4 decades, it's mind-blowing.
It is.
And so our question is, what do we want out of industry? And weirdly, I feel like a younger generation gets this more than an older generation, because I almost feel like you can see, as much as everybody hates on the hipster movement, the thing about hipsters, for me, is that they have a certain love for a way, and this is interesting from a design perspective, they have a certain love for a way that things were designed in the past, that they were made to last, or they were made to be kept, or they were made to be cherished. So, you know, a typewriter might last for 100 years, or somebody might have a fountain pen that they keep their whole lives. And, you know, you could look at, say, a Victorian fountain pen and a 1970s Bic biro as being absolutely, from a design point of view, symptomatic of what went wrong and what we need to get back to. And I almost feel like a younger generation is already positioning itself to have to think like that.
that's good.
You know, that's my opinion. I'd be very interested to know what your opinion is on that.
No, I would totally agree with you in that sense. But then materialism is something that needs to be taken care of, and I really don't know how that is going to be looked at in the future. Like for me, my example, if you've taken this and the example of mobile phones. You know, and the amount of churning that actually happens in mobile phones is mind-bogglingly high compared to, say, for example, computers. You know, like I don't remember buying a computer within 2 years of me buying a new one, but I'm very interested or even encouraged to buy a new mobile phone within an year of its buying power. So I don't know, you know, whether that is sustainable. But then on the other side, we have to think about the economics as well.
I was about to say exactly this. So I was about to say exactly this, which is, I don't think there can be any solution to, and it probably actually links to some of the other SDGs, is I don't think there's a solution to climate change without a more equitable economic structure. I think fundamentally you can see inequality as one of the main drivers of climate harming policies, behaviours, government actions, all sorts of things. The question again is always going to come back, I think, to the politics of it, to how do we distribute the wealth that we've got in a way that minimises harm to the environment, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The first thing about the consumerism and materialism is that takes philosophical and cultural and social change. But the one thing I would say about philosophical, cultural and social change is it can happen quickly. We've seen, I think often people say, oh, this can never change because it's just the way it is. But we've seen many examples in our lifetimes of things changing, seeming like they'll never change and then changing very quickly. Smoking was an example of that. When I was a kid, everybody smoked everywhere. Everywhere I went, there were people smoking. In cars, in planes, in trains, in restaurants. And people said there'll never be a smoking ban. And at a certain point people accepted it and understood. And I think we're at that moment of change with climate change actually, where people have been saying you just have to look at the speed with which the politics in America have changed from 8 years ago. I got on a plane and a law student from Harvard University was sat next to me, and she said to me, "Do you believe in climate change?" And it blew my mind that a law student at Harvard could ask me if I believe in, she was asking me if I believe in Tinkerbell. Just in the last 3 years, because I've been back to America in the last 3 years, you can see everybody, even the amount of Republicans I was speaking to who traditionally would have said it's a conspiracy, they were all saying, no, this is a serious issue and we think something needs to happen. So I think that a positive takeaway, I think, would be that we can change when we need to. One of the things specifically that got me, the first thing I'd say is I'm now a designer and a design academic, but I wasn't originally. I started out, my PhD was in film and sociology, so I was interested in human behaviour essentially. And specifically I was looking at human behaviour and migration patterns of people and how people moving across industries helped innovation actually. So my interest was migration, innovation, human behaviour in an industrial context. When I got here though, and I started working as a design lecturer, I'd always been interested in sustainability. But what happened was, within the first year of me working here, there was Victoria University was involved in a thing called the Solar Decathlon. And specifically the Architecture and Design School was leading it, and it was essentially a student-run project to design, build and enter into a competition, an architecture, a house, into the Washington DC Solar Decathlon. So the Solar Decathlon was 20 houses all competing with each other as a sustainability, who could design the most sustainable house essentially, and not just the most sustainable house, but the best kind of designed, architected and engineered houses for demonstrating future technologies, potentials of future technologies. And New Zealand was the one of only 3 entries from outside of America that year. So what I did was I started working on because one of the things I'm interested in when I was looking at migration patterns is data visualization. And so what I did was I started I led the team that designed the energy monitor for the house. But what was really interesting about that was to see, we didn't win, but we came second, I think. And we nearly won. We came really close. And interestingly, in the engineering category, we came first, actually.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things was the judges commented on the energy monitor that our team had produced as one of the reasons. It was actually, weirdly, it was, I think, Barack Obama's energy secretary at the time that was doing the judging. But there were universities in this competition from all over America that had incredible quantities of money behind them, with big endowments. There were universities from Germany that had been entering this competition over and over again, and they really knew what they were doing from a German engineering perspective. And what was interesting to me was to see the way New Zealand's entry, it was to see the way New Zealanders were working, because they think differently, I think. I think there's a thing about New Zealand, and I especially noticed this coming from Britain. In Britain, and I think this is the case for a lot of people in Europe, full stop, which is you grow up there, you feel like you're growing up in a museum. like because there's been thousands of years of people, and so living there, having to do things the same way for thousands of years, and so they kind of, I'm sure you get that in India as well, right? And so the attitude is, don't try and change this; it will be too hard to change it. And when the thing that really struck me when I first got to New Zealand was the way there was still, I found it unbelievably liberating for the first couple of years, was the way there was still a mindset of, you can do this, give it a go, there's nothing to be lost. And for me, the number one experience of this that kind of symptomatized this was, I was trying to get hold of some energy monitors by a company called Owl. Right. And Owl had been a New Zealand company that did energy monitors. Okay. And they got bought by an Australian company, which then got bought by a British company. So in the end, Britain ended up owning this company that started out in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. And late one night, I stayed in my office till late because I wanted to call them and say, can I get hold of some of these? I'd like to get 12 of these energy monitors, because we were experimenting and trying to work out how we could monitor the energy in the house. And I waited in my office until late. I made a call to someone in Britain, and there's a comedy sketch in Britain where somebody calls somebody on the phone and the person says, the computer says no, right? And the thing is that they're deferring the responsibility for saying no to the computer when the computer doesn't say anything, right? Humans take the decision, but you realize it, in Britain, in large countries, full stop, there's often a thing where people are afraid to take responsibility or afraid to take the initiative. And that doesn't happen in New Zealand. In New Zealand, you can still take the initiative and you can still take responsibility and know that it's not going to end your career somehow, And so I called, and this woman essentially, no matter how much I talked to her and said, look, this is what I'm doing, I'm a researcher in the University of Wellington, I want to get hold of your energy monitors, it could be quite good for you, it'll be in a competition, your energy monitors would get coverage. She just kept saying, no, there's no one I can put you in touch with, nothing's going to happen. So I thought, what am I going to do? And the next morning, I came into the office and I realised, I thought, you know what, there will be a New Zealand supplier for Owl. And it was in Christchurch. And I thought, I can call the guy in Christchurch and I'll try this a different way. I'll try this the New Zealand way. And I called him and I said, hey, I'm in Victoria University in Wellington. I'm trying to get hold of some owls. I didn't get very far when I called Britain, ironically, given that I'm from Britain and he said, oh yeah, no worries, I'll give you all the contacts I've got in Britain. He gave me the contact details of the CEO. He had the contact details of the CEO. Now, in New Zealand, I think there's that 2 degrees of separation thing and within half an hour, I'd spent a good few hours trying to, call this woman, call another person, call, different departments the night before in Britain, and got nowhere. And within less than half an hour, actually, within 10 or 20 minutes, he'd given me all the contact details of all the people that were important that I needed. Oh, wow. And I contacted them, and within a day they said, yep, we'll supply you as many energy monitors as you want. And for me, this was the difference between New Zealand and what you can do in New Zealand compared to other countries, is that innovation can happen because people are still connected to each other. People still treat each other like there's a goodwill for you want to engineer this, let's try it, or you want to try this experimental thing. I mean, New Zealand will always talk about number 8 wire to the point where it almost seems like a hilarious cliche to me. But there's something in it, I think, as well.
It is, yeah.
Have you experienced that? Has that been
It is,
from an engineering point of view?
I think so, yeah. I think innovation in New Zealand is an easy task to do. All you have to do is think about an idea. Probably, the infrastructure in New Zealand actually makes it a lot more easier. And probably they think, the Taiwan sees us as a sustainable nation as well.
Yes.
That the nation that actually does and put in lots of effort into improving and developing sustainable solutions.
Yeah, there's something for me about New Zealand. I mean, some of the research I do is about how the migration of highly skilled individuals into New Zealand is affecting its capacity for innovation. One of the things I think is really interesting is New Zealand's at this very odd cultural and geographical crossroads that it's far away enough to have an image as being quite green and sustainable nation, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with that. But it also has an enormous amount of. It's almost as if New Zealand's been branding itself for so many years that everybody knows New Zealand. I mean, when you think about the size of the country population-wise and its geographical distance, and then you think about the fact that I left Britain, I came to New Zealand, and I felt more connected to the world. I felt like there were more opportunities for innovation and partnership in New Zealand than there were, on the west of Europe. And so one of the things I often think about New Zealand is that there are just so many more possibilities afforded all the time, that you can go to a social event and you can meet someone and you can talk to them and say, I do this, I've got this idea for this, and they'll frequently say yes. But I also think that that's not just happening on a local level. I think that's happening on a global level as well. I think people, for whatever reason, institutions and people want to talk to New Zealand. And weirdly, though we're 12 hours on a flight to anywhere, I still feel more connected here than I do in Europe.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
We are probably one of the luckiest countries in the world. Yes? Thank you, sir.
So, to rapid change.
Yes, I would say so.
To the positive.
Yeah.